Hello, hello, welcome. My name is Rin Macbeth and I am the chair of WAGIC. Now, we have a very cosy crowd in today. I'm here to tell you a little bit about WAGIC, what we do, and some of the history and sort of things going on in the WA game development industry here. So, let's get straight into it. Oh, wrong way. Okay, there we go. So, we're going to cover today a brief history of WA development. It's a little longer than you'd expect. We're going to go into the current opportunities, thanks to Screen West, and we're going to look at a bit of the future of what WA Games involves. Let's get into it. So, at WAGIC, we are the industry body for game developers in WA. We are about creating a, healthy industry that is sort of well-rounded, sustainable, thriving, well-connected, all of those, fun buzzwords, but basically just a good industry to be part of. We do that through events. We do that through lots of networking opportunities. We do that through connecting the right sorts of people, and, lots of different things. Okay. First up, to give us the history of WA Games, we have Matt Dyatt, also known as Game Dad. He is a Perth-based developer and SAE lecturer, and he's been wearing so many hats over the last 10 years. So, let's give it up for Matt.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm Matt. I hate that Rin has dobbed me in as being Game Dad. That's a deep secret. So I'm here to talk about making games in Western Australia. So I've been here in WA working in the games industry for a decade. I am a previous chair of Let's Make Games, which is now WAGIC. And I've had the privilege to actually grow up alongside the games industry here in Western Australia. When Rin reached out to me and said, hey, we want you to cover the history of Western Australia's games industry, I was a little bit offended because I don't feel that old. But it's actually got quite a storied history. There's a lot to cover. I'm undoubtedly going to miss some stuff. But let's get into it. So I have covered everything as kind of fun little eras. So we have the before times, the 19XXs. So this was like the 1980s to the early 2000s. The first game releases were recorded around this time in the state. Glenn Spores made Master of Icons in 1986, which is kind of like the first recorded game release in WA. But the first commercial games release was Paul Turbot of Silver Lightning Software. And Paul is very much kind of a storied character in Western Australia's games history. I'm not going to talk about specifically Paul, but he turns up a lot. So Silver Lightning Software released multiple games all in the lead up to the early 2000s. And the scene started ramping up once we got to the 2000s with the release of games like Osu, which is very, very popular all over the world now. The developer of that lives over in Japan and still works on it. And I know I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. And Spin Fast Cricket, which was another one, very well known in Australia around the time, Western Australia around the time. But where our story really kind of begins in WA is 2000 to 2009. In 2007, the state government announced funding for a game studio to come over and work here called Interzone. Interzone had $500,000 to actually set up, and they were the first international game developer to kind of establish in the state. They were developing a soccer-themed MMO called Interzone Football, F-U-T-E-B-O-L, is a weird kind of name. And as part of their being established, TAFE and other universities started actually establishing programs for people to go through and start studying and learning games with the intent of actually moving them into Interzone to actually start working there. So this was a time where the state's really starting to grow in a really, really big way. But this is where I came into the scene. I started my journey in the West Australian games industry by studying at East Perth TAFE. And I got to actually visit Interzone. And I realized at the time that it was actually pretty dire. The studio was empty. There weren't a lot of game developers there. It was really strange because like all we'd kind of heard in the public at the time was that they were here, they were working on games. In 2008, around the time that I visited, Interzone had actually stopped paying their staff. Staff weren't actually getting superannuation payments. They were owed a lot of money. And then in 2009, staff found themselves locked out of the office, and the CEO ran off with all of the hardware and software that they'd actually developed up to that point. So around this same time, Let's Make Games gets founded. A whole bunch of local developers from Interzone and elsewhere in the state basically kind of recognized the need to band together as a result of the setup and the situation with Interzone. So out of those dire circumstances, a community was born here in Western Australia. So all the programs that had been set up kind of resulted in this massive boom in the West Australian games industry from 2009 to 2013, where a whole bunch of those game development courses started seeing people actually leaving. You know, they had finished their courses, they were ready to enter the industry and actually start making games and developing things. And so that new wave of talent brought a whole new wave of additional games. Let's Make Games started hosting game developer showcases every year, starting in 2009. It grew more and more popular with each year. John Robertson, who you will actually see here at Pixelexpo, he made The Dark Room. It was actually a YouTube series at this time, so that was from 2009 when he first did that. Footy Boss by Different Methods and Zombie Outbreak Simulator by Binary Space released in the following year, so in 2010. And every year in the state, the amount of game releases actually started doubling year over year. So the amount of games in 2010 doubled from that on 2009. The amount of games in 2011 doubled on that from 2010. It just kept on going and going. So 2014 to 2018, the games industry in Western Australia is probably at its strongest point at this point. We've kind of gone from strength to strength there, but the amount of people that are kind of here and working in the industry has remained about the same. We've got a lot of graduates coming out now who are working in the industry, but we've pretty much stayed pretty level from this period of time. It was around this time that Let's Make Games went and started hosting the very first Perth Games Festival. This was under the guidance of Anthony Sweet, who was the chair of Let's Make Games at the time. Public awareness of the local games industry started to skyrocket, and so we ended out with the community expanding as a result of that. More people started getting involved, making games. A lot of people who didn't go through games courses started joining, so we had artists and audio people and programmers who didn't study games specifically, but now were interested in making games. The community really exploded as a result of Perth Games Festival and the running of it over those few years. Over 2015 to 2018, we had some of the biggest game releases, some of the most popular and well-known ones that you still see quite often around here. We had games like Freedomfall by Stirfire Studios, who I would go on to work for around this time. Bush Bash by SK Games, who basically worked on these really fun physical games that they'd show off in their backyard. It was fantastic. Cogs by Raze, who you will actually is a board game that you'll quite often see around. There was a game that I can't say the word for because it's a swear word, but it's literally a card game called F the Game, which is actually a very popular international release. We had Battlestar Galactica Deadlock by Black Lab, that's Paul Turbot again. Paradigm by Jacob Janerka, which was immensely popular and got picked up by a bunch of big-name YouTubers. So the list goes on. Like, this period of time was a real strong period for the Western Australian games industry. But we all know what came next when we enter into the 2020s. A decade after Interzone collapsed, we had COVID. But more importantly, Screen West actually did their first trial fund for local game developers. And so there were 5 games out of that were funded. There was Court Fiends by Nathan Scott, Ghost Cam by Arch Rebels, Lost and Hound by Daisy Ale Soundworks, Nicograms by Hungry Sky, which you can actually play here today, and Oh Me Oh My AI by Every Second Studio, which is actually one of the games that I'm working on. It's still in development. So the world goes into COVID lockdown in 2020, and Perth is thankfully pretty isolated from all of it. Like, if you were going to school at that time or working at that time, we actually had very few lockdowns. So our games industry kind of kept on chugging along. We kept on making awesome stuff. Project Wingman by Sector D2 came out. Warhammer 40k Battle Sector by Black Lab Games again. Paul just keeps on turning up in this story. God of Rifts by Boss Music Games. They were actually SAE graduates that managed to get a publisher. So come 2023, Screen West ended up actually expanding their fund. So all of those trial games that ended up being funded, it was a great experiment for Screen West, and now they actually do more funding. Around 2023 as well, we had the WA Games Expo Festival Games Week, WA Games Week, sorry. And so the games industry has really kind of continued to go from strength to strength. And that was what brings us to the present day, where we are now. After over a decade, Let's Make Games has been rebranded as WAGIC, which I really like the name because it's really fun to say. With uncertain times ahead, because the games industry globally is kind of going through a pretty major recession, essentially. Like they're kind of contracting in a big way. There's been over 20,000 game developers that have lost their jobs. But again, WA has been actually really insulated from this, so we haven't actually experienced this mass amount of layoffs. But no matter what the future holds for the West Australian games industry, the big thing that defines us is that we're an industry that has overcome adversity. We started out with adversity, we experienced adversity along the way. We will continue to make awesome games. So thank you very much for having me. I'm going to give you back to Rin.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was an amazing sort of capturing of the history of WA Games. But now we are going to move into current day. What is happening? So these are Matt's credits, by the way, all sources cited like a true lecturer. Okay, so I now would love to introduce Mark Smith. He is the digital games manager at Screen West, where his job is basically to help coordinate games in WA for grants and funding opportunities. He's also one of us. He's the dev of Monster Shop Games. So if you spot the sneaky little hype reel we've got going at the WAGIC booth on the show floor in Pav 1, we have a very cool preview of his game there, if you'd like to see it. Unfortunately, he's a very busy man and can't have a booth today. But without further ado, Mark Smith. Thanks.
Thank you, Rin. Oh, that's loud. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me, and welcome to Pixelexpo Act 3. How do I work this thing? Where's the next button? Oh. Hold on. There we go. There we are. All right, let me just get my notes out. So yeah, my name's Mark, and I'm the digital games manager at Screen West. For those of you who don't know who Screen West are and what we do, we're WA's not-for-profit screen funding and industry development organisation. We fund screen projects such as film, TV, and of course games. I've been at Screen West since January 2023, and in that time, it's been amazing seeing how many talented game developers we have here. I've been involved previously with WAGIC, formerly Let's Make Games, and I thought I was familiar with most of the games coming out of WA. Once I joined Screen West, it was obvious that there were many, many more games in development in WA than I first thought. Every round of funding we hold for games production ends up receiving more applications than we expect. Unfortunately, we can't fund all of the great games that we see, but it's a good sign that the industry here is passionate about their craft and eager to grow and to succeed. ScreenWest has been able to support 32 games projects since the start of 2023, and I think Matt spoke about our previous pilot program with some extra games up there. So you can see some of the artwork from just a few of the games that we've been able to fund, and a lot of them will be here today, so please check them out, as well as 5 game studios through our Business Accelerator funding. I'll move on to the next slide, which is the digital games funding that we offer. We've been able to offer funding to games that are at the concept phase and need to enter pre-production, games that are mostly finished and just need an extra push to get them over the finish line and launch, and games that have already released that want to apply for post-production funding to support content such as porting or DLC or localization. ScreenWest relies on government funding for our grants, and events like this are great for me to report back on to prove how big and how active our industry is. And I'm very happy that we can be a sponsor of this event, which is great. If you're interested in applying for funding, we'll be announcing new rounds of games funding very, very soon. So please subscribe to our newsletter. Go to screenwest.com.au for more information about games funding. And I'll be hanging around today as well if you want to come grab me and have any questions about what we're able to offer. We also have travel funding for game developers wanting to attend games-related events and conferences. I recently got back from Gamescom in Germany, where we were able to take 4 developers from WA. We have generic travel open year-round for specific events that are dedicated rounds. So check our website, and if there's an event you're hoping to go to, have a look and see if it's on our eligible travel list, and you can apply there. Working with the game studios on their, to help fund their games and see so many creative ideas and dreams become reality has been an amazing experience. I can't wait to see what new games come in for funding in the future. Please check out the games on display here and have a chat with the game developers that are showing off their work. As someone who's worked on games before, I know just how hard it is to get something working, especially for a showcase like this. I know a lot of devs that were sort of crunching over the last couple of days, making sure that their builds were all stable and working. So yeah, definitely understand how much effort and work goes into getting something ready for a show like this. And some of the quality of the games is just amazing. So yeah, big round of applause for all the game developers that are here and their games. Not that they're here to hear the applause, but I'm sure they'll appreciate it. And definitely go and check them out and give them feedback on their wonderful games. And that's it for me. So yeah, feel free to scan the QR code for more information on games funding if you have a game idea. And as I said, just support the local industry that's hopefully able to grow and thrive. Thank you, everyone. I'll pass back to Rin.
Thank you so much, Mark. Okay, now you've got me for a bit. So, I did a little bit of an intro at the start, but today I'm going to be talking about the future of games in WA. Now, it's really sort of wildly predictive to make claims about the future, but there's some things we can guess with good certainty. So, first of all, I'm going to do a little bit of a video to show you some of the games that are here today and some of them that are not, but they're all very cool, very awesome projects in WA at the moment. So, let's see if the clicker will work with this. Hey. Okay, it doesn't look like there's any audio on this, but On Orbit is a cool sort of simulator game about making your own space station. Nayar is a very cool jump into sort of like click and find adventure style narrative thing. Tetherball, it's a co-op, sort of couch co-op, fun one. It is super punchy, super fun, great for kids, that sort of stuff. Okay, what do we have next? Misk, A Tiny Tale. So Misk is a super cute robot adventure where you go around and you sort of collect things and you explore this big world, lots of fun characters. Me, You and Kaiju, VR adventures. So this is a really fun one where you play the kaiju, except your friends come in and they're trying to sort of destroy you, so it's co-op. This one's Aim High Lo-Fi. It is sick beats and just like smooth gameplay, really fun. Ghost Cam, this is another VR one where it is like adventure, you're trying to discover stuff and you find the ghosts through little photos. Neon Express is a taxi driving sim where you are in a ultra-futuristic sort of space environment. Okay, Insolitus is a girly pop pink shooter, which is like super bright, super like go fast, keep speedy, that sort of thing. Lunas, this is sort of a spiritual successor to Mario Party. Super fun, lots of co-op games, very couch co-op-y. Take the Wheels is a sort of reinvention of control systems for racing games. It really pushes sort of what's going on with racing. Now this one, Pie in the Sky, Monster Shop Games, that's Mark's game. So you play as the magpie dive-bombing people through swooping season. It is super fun. Courier Tale has just released on Steam only a few weeks ago. It's a super fun, cozy narrative game. One Arrow Archer is a really nice, smooth pixel sort of arrow arching game where you are basically just destroying enemies. Power Sync is a really fun puzzle platformer where you're sort of returning power to this undersea world. We have The Last Werewolf. It is a really fun narrative adventure through sort of just discovering this world around you. Very fun. And then we have Margot. So this one is a sort of self-discovery tale, moving through a world, very cute pixel, sort of aesthetic. Yeah, and it is just a lovely time. Okay, so that is the sort of demo reel of a few of the games. That's certainly not all of them, but that's what we could get in 3 weeks. So, jumping into who am I? My name is Ren Macbeth. I said it at the start, but I'll say it again. I am the chair of WAGIC at the moment and a community manager at Hungry Sky. Forgot to take off the shirt. I've been around for a hot minute. I've been in elected positions in the sort of games industry since 2019 when I was still a student. But I've been around a little longer than that as sort of student involvement. I've been the coordinator for lots of different events in Perth. 2020 Perth Games Festival was my show. And this year I've been putting together lots of fun playtesting events called Let's Break Games. So that's sort of my baby this year. Looking into the current sort of industry, we have a lot of strengths in our industry at the moment. It is a super tight-knit community. There is a lot of camaraderie. Creativity thrives, collaboration is key, and all the sort of works that come out of WA are just punching above their weight at every level. It really sets us up amazingly to become a huge hub for games in Australia and in the world. So I'm going to go into a little bit of a Studios on the Rise highlight here. Now, all of these studios I've picked are ones you can see here in the show today. Getting into it. Funny Fintan Softworks. Now, this is the studio that is making Insolitus. It is a hyper girly pop pink shooter. It's been taking the internet by storm recently. A lot of people have very strong views on, like, you know, hyper pink girly pop games, but this really leans into it and owns it, and it is like the whole selling point of it. Originally, the game was made as a 10th grade high school project, but is now so big they received government grants from, you know, a couple different orgs, and it's just going huge places. Unicat, while technically not like a game development studio, they're a game publisher located here in WA. So their whole thing is they go for like really high quality artistic games. They sort of have this mantra of like, not every publisher is right for a game and not every game is right for like every publisher. They go for games that just really push artistic narrative and quality in their sort of ways that it's built. The game that I have played and loved from them was Dystopica. It's a cozy dark city builder. It's cyberpunk, it's futuristic. You don't really get dark, cyberpunk, and cozy in the same room, so it's really nice to see that pushing sort of further. They also have another game here called Pools, which is like a liminal space, when you're in a building and it's like nighttime and it just feels weird. It gives you the same vibe. It's pretty fun. Both of those games are on the show floor at the moment. Next up, we have Time C Studio. They have Infinity Knights Cross, which is a retro couch co-op, and they had an amazing success earlier this year. They had a Kickstarter that was 250% backed for just under $150,000. That is huge, and they are sort of working on it. They're three brothers all working together to make this game and plan to launch it next year. And then last off, I swear I didn't put this one in myself. It was someone from my team said, you've got to include Hungry Sky. But Hungry Sky Games is a sort of really well-established cornerstone of the WA industry space. They have been around for over a decade. They have been making lots of things, and they've recently transitioned into trying to do mostly games rather than contract work and a bit of games here and there. So their big one that released on mobile year before last, was Necograms, which is a cozy cat puzzle game all about making cats go to sleep on cushions. It is delightful. They've got another one coming out soon called Snow Cone, maybe next year, we'll see. But also with Necograms, they're now releasing it on other platforms. So it's not just mobile, it's coming to lots of different things. It's releasing on Switch in 4 days, and it's releasing on Steam next year. So these are sort of 4 key studios that are here today that you can go and check out on the game floor and see all the cool stuff they're doing. Okay. So let's take a look at the future. What does the future look like to you? If you are in the industry already, you might have some ideas about where things will go, but if you're outside of this entirely, it can be a little weird to sort of think about something you don't really know much about. The games industry in WA, I always like to sort of bring it back down to earth level. It's made by people like you. It is a bunch of ordinary people having fun, making creative projects, and really putting in the hard work. The games industry globally is huge. It is $240 billion in 2020, and it's about to reach to $294 billion in 2024. It is a huge industry with a lot of potential. And our sort of goal with WAGIC is to make WA an amazing place to be part of that huge global industry. If you'd like to be part of the journey to making WA a global player, we're the right people to talk to. Okay. So how could you support the industry? You've heard what I've said, you've heard what the other speakers have said, you're kind of keen, but you don't really know how to get involved. First up, support local games. Local studios are the drivers of the industry here. So when a game has, or when a studio has a game coming out, being there to be their champions, being there to be enthusiastic and say nice things, it makes all the difference. So buying and wish listing, it all makes a difference, especially when things go live globally. The more wish lists you have, the bigger it gets sort of coverage, things like that. You can attend events run by and with game developers. Now, we run a few things throughout the year, and so I'm classing us as by game developers because WAGIC is run by game developers. But also with games. So there's events that happen throughout the year that we show up to that we're not necessarily run by us, but like Tokyo Alley and stuff like that. We show up and we sort of, really enjoy meeting people. It makes a huge difference in the way we develop games when we have public feedback on the way, what's happening in games. And then you can also follow game devs on social media and sign up for mailing lists and all that fun stuff. Stay connected, basically. It's the way that it becomes not just I heard about a thing once and I was interested, but I didn't follow it up. It becomes I'm really keen to be involved and I'm staying in touch type thing. Okay. So for WAGIC, I've just talked about some of the events we sometimes do, but here's the list of them proper. So our big one at the moment is Let's Break Games. It happens quarterly, every 3 months. The next one's in November. Next one after that, I haven't set a date for it. If you have thoughts, let me know. After that, or not after that, but involved with that, there's Game Dev Meetup, which happens every single month. So that is run by our amazing Miles Hanson, who is on Ricochet Rodeo today. He runs these every month, and it's a great chance to, in a casual environment, meet people, chat, get some info, maybe make some friends. Friends are how you get through the community and sort of really connect. We also have Global Game Jam coming up at the start of next year. This happens every year in late January. So this one will be an opportunity to, if you've been, I always say with Global Game Jam, if you're keen on getting into games but don't know where to start, Global Game Jam is the place. Everyone there is sort of joining a team for the first time. Nobody really knows anyone else necessarily, and you don't need to have the best skills. This is a chance for you just to try things out. So Global Game Jam is an amazing opportunity to get your first steps into the industry. And then WA Games Week next year. So this is coming up, but I won't say too much about it because at the closing ceremony, there is a huge announcement coming along. So I'll zip a lip for the moment, but come to the closing ceremony and see. Okay, so how can you get involved with WAGIC? If you like the idea of what we're doing and you like the sound of it all, you can volunteer for us. We are a not-for-profit, so we require volunteers to run. Nobody here gets paid, we all just love doing it. So if you want to volunteer, you are more than welcome to. We are always taking volunteers. You can become a member. If you are already sort of involved in games, but you just want to be like a little more connected, you want to vote on things that matter to you, becoming a member gives you the right to vote. You can join one of our subcommittees. We're sort of stepping it up here. This is the next level of commitment. You like what you hear and you want to be involved and you want to help us run things, join a subcommittee. We have lots of subcommittees running at the moment that have different focus areas, including like community management, managing our online spaces, board games, and we may even have one coming up for running certain events like Global Game Jam soon too. And then participating in our events. So if you come along to a Let's Break Games, anyone is welcome at a Let's Break Games. It's not just game devs. We want the public there too. Come along to our events. Show us how keen you are. We'd love to have you. Okay, now, we have a little bit of time, and I have been told there was a Q&A in the description of this talk. So, can I invite my speakers from before to jump on the stage with me? And if you would like to ask a question, I'd ask you to chuck your hand up, and somebody will be around with a mic. Yeah, just think about any questions you might have for us as game developers, as industry professionals, or just like avid gamers. Okay. So some of the, yeah, we've got one over there. Wonderful.
So you mentioned that the W game industry is very insulated from the recession going around globally, right?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just... So how insulated exactly are we from the...
From the recession?
Yeah.
So we don't have a lot of very big studios here. The thing that's really kind of impacted a lot of the industry globally has been the fact that really big studios have to worry about their investors, and investors are kind of putting their money away at the moment. And a lot of those international publishers as well are just not publishing games. They're holding on to their cash and they're kind of weathering the storm. But WA's never really relied on either of those things to make games. And so as a result of that, we just keep on doing what we're doing. You see it as well a lot in Victoria, where their funding at Screen Vic is very good, so their industry is still chugging along. We had some really unfortunate losses in the Australian games industry as a result of that, like League of Geeks, which is an amazing studio, but they were reliant on that outside publishing money. So it was really as a result of that, but because we're so insulated just as a state, and then insulated in terms of the way that we've been developing games for so long, it hasn't really had the impact here. Not to say that it's impossible that it could, but certainly at the moment, we've not really had layoffs or anything like that in the state at all, yeah.
Cool. Next one, there we go.
What's the size of these game development companies these days that are still around? And just wondering, like, is it still viable to release a game if you're just like a one-man band? You know, if you're a passionate person, you have the skill to do a bit of the 3Ds, a bit of the game logic, and then, is it still viable to do that? Or these days you will need a team to at least achieve something that's viable for a release?
Yeah.
Say Steam standard. Yeah.
So plenty of the studios in WA are on a smaller scale. So they tend to be, there's plenty of solo devs around the place. It is certainly a viable option. There are plenty of small-scale teams where it's sort of between like 2 to 5 people, and then above 5, like 5 to 10, there's a couple, and there's a couple that are bigger than that as well, but they are less frequently there. Do you have any extra thoughts on that?
Yeah. I would almost say that being smaller is better in the current financial situation, right? Like, it's those gigantic studios with hundreds of people that are having hundreds of layoffs, but the small teams have had a huge deal of success. You only need to look at games like Undertale to see, how much success a small team can really have. It's really about being passionate and knowing what you're doing, and kind of like striking while the iron's hot at the right moment, right? You kind of capture somebody's imagination, then you can be successful. But it's a lot easier to fund a single-man team than it is to fund a 300-person team.
Okay, yep, there we go.
With the major gaming industry leading more towards microtransactions and breaking games up into DLC packages and delivering half projects as a released game for a full cost, do you find that because WA's industry is smaller, you don't have those pressures to do that to the games that come out around here?
I can speak to my own experience as a developer for that, in that I feel like there isn't that pressure to really deliver. Often those pressures come from big publishers where they really want to make their investment back on you. And so working at a smaller scale allows you to have more financial freedom about the decisions and the ethics you choose to incorporate into your games. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think another aspect of that is that what we're seeing in the industry at the moment, at least from my perspective, is these smaller indie games doing really well because they're not constrained by having those sort of pressures put on them by a publisher. So with smaller, more passionate teams, you get a really quality product that people connect with rather than something that feels like it's made by a large corporation with making money in mind. So I guess that's where WA falls into that niche where we've got small teams that are really passionate about putting out quality products over just making money.
Okay, next up.
Is it easy to join a game studio or find one, or?
It depends on your skill set. There are certain skill sets that are really in demand, and you'll always be able to find work if you have them. I think tech artist is one of the really areas that is always a need and a niche sort of there. But honestly, a lot of people I've seen, if they haven't found success with other people's companies, they start their own. Because really, being a game dev is often having a creative vision. It's more being an artist than it is being an engineer. In some ways, or at least in my experience. And so being able to express your own creative interests can be a huge motivator to create your own thing. So even if there isn't something out there necessarily for you with your skills, you can make your own. It's very, I wouldn't say easy, but it's not hard, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's really going to depend on where you want to work and the place that you want to work in. Certainly at the moment, if you're looking for a place to work specifically and you want to get a wage, that can be harder to do just because of the fact that the industry is going through this contraction. There's a lot more competition for entry-level roles. Like, there's people with a decade of experience like myself who are applying for roles just to get paid, to get something because they've lost their previous job. But certainly here in WA, like, if you want to find people to work with, our audio designer on Omi and My AI, we got him because we did the Global Game Jam together. Like, it wasn't because I heard from him any other way. It was literally just he worked with us on the Global Game Jam. He did such a good job. I was like, do you want to just work with us on this project when we got the funding? So it's all about kind of that networking and having the skill and just kind of making a positive impression, I think. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Up the back there.
In regard to the ScreenWest funding, is there a specific limit on the size or scale of the game to apply or get the ScreenWest funding, or?
No, there's no specific size or scale. So we've, in the past, funded games that were from a solo developer who was working on a really short timeline and small budget, up to larger teams that had, budgets almost in the millions. So really, as long as your application makes sense with the budget that you're working with and the amount that you're asking fits the guidelines and the requirements, there's no real size or scale, as long as it's, it meets the eligibility criteria. And if you read what it's going to be assessed on, that it meets all of those criteria points as a solid game that's worth backing from our perspective. So yeah, no limit on size or scale.
Okay, next up.
I'm usually supporting indie games, but normally finding them can be quite an issue. Normally you search for them on itch.io, maybe even lucky if you find it on Steam. Where would you normally seek out to support small indie developers?
Yeah, so if I was looking for local indie developers, I'd be following all of the social media sort of spheres that they run in. So at the moment, there are, like WAGIC runs a lot of social media that devs interact with. That's a really great way to find developers. We have Discord, we have a Facebook, we have a Twitter, we have a LinkedIn, we have a this, we have a that. We're basically everywhere. So if I was trying to look for local indie developers, I would be going onto those sort of social media platforms and then just finding them from there. The Discord is really active for our community. That is maybe the best way to connect with developers, like on a personal level. Yeah. Any thoughts?
Join the Discord.
Yeah, cheers.
Are there many in WA composers and artists working directly for studios, or is it mostly like freelance work?
I'm not sure on the sort of like solid numbers. I would say there are more contract jobs than not, is my impression of the industry. It does often run on contracts and freelance and smaller scale sort of work at the moment. That's not to say those jobs don't exist, because I currently work one. So there are sort of employee level jobs available out there, but they aren't as frequent. Yeah.
Yeah, because like in terms of artists and composers in particular, even in big AAA studios, quite often end up being freelance. Like they'll be hired to do a specific project and then they'll move on. But artists usually do end out embedded unless you're doing concept art. Like that quite often, again, can end out being like you'll hire the right concept artist for the game that you're trying to create. So it really depends there. But certainly here in WA is like, you didn't ask about engineering, but we have a studio here in WA, Titanium, who literally do just engineering outsourcing. And so their studio is all programming engineers. They just worked on 7 Days to Die. They were doing the console release stuff for that. So they were literally contacted by the studio over in Texas to make that version, so that you can make it happen, right? Like you could go and make a team that just works on concept art and that sort of thing, and then start getting international clients. Like if Titanium can do it with engineering, then anybody can really do it with any sort of discipline.
Cheers. Okay, do we have any other questions? Okay, looks good. I think we might wrap it up there then. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming along. It has been a pleasure talking to you all. If you have any further questions or you want to have a chat at all, there is the WAGIC booth on Pav 1. You can come and chat to us there, or as you can see, I'm on Hungry Sky booth duties after this, so you can come and chat with me there, although I'll be wearing my Hungry Sky hat at that time. Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for coming along.